gold medal at 79 kilos. Burrows for the United States in the red. Nokudil Arimi, Iran in the blue.
Nokudil Arimi is really going to try and tie up Jordan Burrows and try to tie up his hands from space. There's nobody better in the world, especially with the fakes and the counterattacks that Jordan Burrows is.
Hello and welcome to another Open Mat, and we are joined by Dr. Saam Falahati, who is the Chief Medical Officer for Team GB Wrestling. He is also the physician for United Wrestling, World Wrestling, am I correct? Yeah. And you also do some lecturing, I've seen on your social media.
Yeah. I lecture at University of Glasgow as well, the medical
Excellent.
school.
So one of the things we have to jump into first is, how did you end up in wrestling? Because wrestling in the UK, when you think of places like the Middle East or even in Europe in comparison to America, the UK as a wrestling base is it's far behind. So how did you get into wrestling?
Well, the real reason for that is because, as you say, it is big in the Middle East, and probably one of the biggest countries in the world for it is Iran. And my mum and dad are both Iranian. I was born in the UK. But essentially, in the summer times when I was a kid and my mates here used to go to like football camp and stuff during the summer, when I used to go see my grandparents in Iran, I'd get flung into a wrestling club by some former world team member and be with a bunch of like 100 kids on the mat, wrestling. Because in Iran, the wrestlers there, the Olympic world champions, they're treated like superstars. They're like glorified real life Hercules, and it is so big in Iran. It's really part of the culture. It's more than just sport. The sense of being a champion, being able to kind of beat someone up, but also without actually, because wrestling is that combat sport where one of the few combat sports where actually any contact to the head, punching, kicking, it's illegal. It's not, it's described as a brutality, but still, for anyone that has wrestled, as you guys have, how tough it is. And these guys are, to be able to kind of be so strong, so technical, but yet have a certain humility about you. That's a big thing about a part of the culture, because if you're good in Iran, but you're in any way arrogant about it, you'll not be accepted in that community at all. It's all about humility, but being very, very strong and very technical. So that's essentially how, because when I used to go there, I used to just see how these almost as I say, superstars, when I was a little kid, get treated, and it was so cool, and it just completely absorbed me. But it was more of a summer thing for me. I'd come back here and then it would die. it would die.
Did you never join a Scottish wrestling team or a UK team?
You know what? It's sad because the thought didn't even cross my mind. I mean, I was a kid, so I didn't even think about it. And then the area that I grew up in, there actually was a wrestling club nearby, but there was 5 people there. The vibe wasn't the same. It was the level of coaching wasn't the same. It wasn't as fun for me, and I never had any aspirations of becoming a champion or Olympic champion. I just really enjoyed it. So when I wasn't part of that kind of that energy, that buzz, it just felt like a step down. So I didn't pursue it. No.
I had my youngest daughter. I'd been taking her to wrestling club. Yeah. She went to the Trist, which has been going for years. It's a very, very good club, but it's the same issue. You've maybe got 5 people turning up in the mat one week, and then you've maybe got 2 the following week. And it's really, really hard for these clubs to generate the interest, because there's so many different sports out there which ticks the box for a parent. Obviously, the combat sports side of wrestling it'll take away a lot for parents. They'll be like, I don't know, my daughter or my son doing that, and they'll put them into karate. And then I found that quite a lot of the young guys, when you say wrestling to them, I think they're busting out steel chairs.
WWE.
And it's kind of destroying the sport, the Olympic side of it. Because when you look at places like America, and they've got it in from a very young age, and the level of these kids, they can get scholarships, and they can go on to be world champions. I know you work very closely with these governing bodies. Is there something in the line to try and improve the uptake of wrestling within the UK?
Well, in my opinion, it has to go down the route of how the Americans are doing it, as in it has to be introduced at a school age, and I mean primary school age in here for it to become popular. Because, you know, it's not like equestrian or fencing. You don't need much equipment. It's not expensive. And kids naturally, you know, whether you're girls or boys, they like, you know, just like, you know, if you're on a playground in Glasgow, you'll probably see like, you know, two guys like, you know, just rolling about wrestling, but not actually wrestling. But it is, and it can be just introduced that in that level where it's just fun and active, and it helps like, you know, in terms of health and exercise. But then filtering through, there will be those that are like, actually, you know what, I quite like this. I'm getting more invested in it, and that's how it works in America. And I think culturally, our country is a lot more, you know, rather than say like Dagestan or like Eastern Europe, where or even in Iran, like I was saying this to one of my friends, like in Iran, it's so big, but then when you get to like the state levels of people that are trying to make the national team and stuff like that, I know coaches that say like, you know, to their athletes, like if you give up a point here, you're bringing shame to your family. Like dramatic, like, you know, extreme, like, you know, things like here, like a point, not losing a match. Like, you know, if you give up a point and it's not, and it's in, and you can see it's in them, they're almost like trauma. Now I'm not recommending like you go down that way, but what I'm saying is that we're so much more like towards the American side of the spectrum, where I think if we tie it and couple it with education, where you're incentivized, okay, you know, you can actually make a career out of this, you can get scholarship to a good university, and then there's the Olympics, World Championships and stuff like that, then I don't see any reason why it can't be there. I just don't think that infrastructure of making it very widespread within schools has come yet, but I think that would be the future. That would be what I'd love to see. I
agree with you. I'd love to see that as well. Obviously, coming from watching my daughter doing it, and then getting to an age where she's not enjoying it because the level of bodies round about her. It's the same person she's training with, and and that's one of the reasons why she stopped doing it, because she's not getting an opportunity to wrestle with a girl. She's wrestling with a boy, and even at that age of being 9, 10, 11 years old, there's still
you do start to see the difference.
It's starting to come at that age.
You see the boys start to pull away. Even I remember when my son was like 9 and 10 at jiu-jitsu, going against girls at 12 and 30, there is already a strength difference starting to appear in the boys. They are able to overpower them. So why is it so like life and death in Iran? Why is this? How come it's so ingrained in the culture? Because we do see, obviously in the Western world, see it as an American sport, but quite clearly it's not.
No, I mean, I would probably say for freestyle wrestling, the three biggest countries, or the ones that are most successful traditionally, are Russia, Iran, and the USA. And culturally and stylistically, the way they wrestle is very, very different. So to answer your question, in Iran, because it's even, as I say, it's not just a sport, it's like life and death. And usually a lot of like, you know, the kids that come into wrestling, they do come from deprived backgrounds, and wrestling is their, maybe their only like, you know, option to bring glory to their family, glory to their community and their town and city. And as I say, like, you know, if you see like, you know, some of like, you know, the big superstars, like, you know, in Iran, and it would be the equivalent of if they go like on the street, like if Lionel Messi just like walk down like, you know, Sakio Street, like they get mobbed, like they get like absolutely like the adoration, everything. And these are obviously all these like young kids are like, you know, like looking at that and seeing, and when they think, okay, I want to be that person, then and with wrestling being such a tough like, you know, sport, there's nothing to fall back on either. And that's why that's why I don't like, actually, because in America, you could be the number 4 guy in your weight, okay? But if you're the number 4 guy in your weight, or even if you're the number 2 guy in your weight, you'll never make the world and Olympic team. But you will be good enough that you've probably got a scholarship, you've you know, been educated and everything like that, and then you use everything that you've learned from wrestling, the determination, resilience, all of that, and use those transferable skills into becoming a good businessman, you know, a coach, doctor, whatever it may be. So then they still have something to fall back on. Whereas like in some of these countries like Iran, it's either that or not. It's either like gold or nothing, and that's quite a shame. I think, you know, I think it's getting a little bit better, but they might not. They won't usually have like educations to fall back on and stuff like that.
It's a very old fashioned attitude, eh?
Very much. Because even like, I mean, in Russia, like the kind of fallback would be, so in the US, the fallback would be maybe like their education, but in Russia it would be MMA. Like, you know, realistically, a lot of these guys are like saying, okay, like I can't be the number one guy, because it's brutal like that. Like, you know, lots of other sports, you see like athletics, swimming, you'll see like, you know, 5 guys from the UK, you know, like, you know, in the same, like, you know, like going to the Olympics. But for wrestling, you have to be number 1 in your country. And even if you're number 2 in your country and you're number 2 in the world, because you're that good, you'll never get that chance to, like, you know, show it. So in Russians or something, they'll like say, okay, let's try like, you know, a different sport, like, you know, MMA, for example, and then they'll be very successful at it. But in Iran, MMA is kind of looked down upon, which is quite interesting.
Because it's fighting.
It's
not technical, it's just scrapping.
There's a bit of a, okay, you know, that's a more thuggish like kind of way. It's still very, the mentality is fascinating. Whereas there would be loads of guys that if they did, like, you know, transfer over, I'm sure they'd be very, very successful, but it's just looked down upon.
It's crazy. One of the things that I had seen when I was wrestling, because I had spent a fair bit of time with British wrestling, Scottish wrestling, there was that, as you're saying, the number 1 in your country, the number two doesn't get to represent the country. And there was a time where a few of these guys were coming over to Scotland and representing Scotland in the UK, and just because there was nobody to represent the Scottish level, so we had a few different. I'm sure one of them was from Africa. One of the females was from Africa, and she represented Scotland. And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, if you look at the Olympics that just went in Paris, there, officially, like, Russia wasn't there, right? But if you look at, say, like the 74 kilogram weight category, and there were 16 participants in that, I think about 7 of them were ethnically Russian. So, but they were just representing Hungary, Albania, Romania, and the other. So, it's a very common thing, unfortunately, now. And I think United World Wrestling are trying to, like, you know, change the rules on that, so it's not easy to, like, change that sport nationality. But if anything, as things currently stand, it just makes things a hell of a lot harder for, say, the number 1 guy in Britain right now, because when you're going to the European Championships, you're not just having to face Russia once, you're probably having to face Russia, like, you know, 5 or 6 times, but they're just under a different flag. And it can be just the skill gap at the moment is just too far, and that's what makes things quite tricky and difficult, because there's these pockets of talent in the world right now which is just so far ahead of everywhere else, but they're going and representing other countries and things like that. But it's still Russia, you know, still no matter what flag, it could be Greece or whatever, but it's still Russia.
And I get it from, like, the sense of British wrestling, Scottish wrestling, they obviously would like the medals, because more medals means more funding, and then you can push the sport. So I get it from that sense, but as you're saying, the number 1 guy is not getting to represent his country. And there was another very similar. There was the best guy to represent the country never got to represent the country, because his chance of getting a medal in his weight division was very unlikely. So they put forward a heavier weight.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was Joe Henry. So Joe Henry qualified to, was it the Australian Olympics?
Okay.
And he got to represent the UK because he wasn't the best wrestler, but what
was that the Commonwealth Games, or was it the Olympics?
It must have been the
I think it was
Commonwealth,
yeah.
He had enough points, and they deemed that his opportunity to gain a medal was much higher than a more skilled opponent at a lower weight class who was going up against, as you're saying, Iranians, Russians. So I get they're obviously wanting medals. I get that, but they're not giving people an opportunity to 6 minutes to rise to the occasion.
No, absolutely. I know. And I think I think there needs to just be a massive, I think the sport of MMA, if I'm honest, has really kept wrestling alive in this country, because majority of MMA gyms will have wrestling classes, wrestling coaches. You will do wrestling, and I think it's given a certain limelight to wrestling because, MMA fighters like Habib and how, successful, some of these guys are who have transitioned from wrestling into MMA. I think that has allowed guys that are, just pure freestyle wrestlers, like guys that are part of, like, say, the British wrestling team and stuff, to come into, like, do seminars in the MMA gyms or come and, like, help out, like, UFC fighters. And it's been really, like, it's really kept, like, the sport alive. But I think it's almost sad that a sport that was in the ancient, like, Olympics is being kept alive by a sport that's, what, 30, less than, or just over 30 years old? But crazy.
Would the problem not
in this
be...
country?
Would the problem not be that, obviously, if this country doesn't have that cultural prestige attached to the sport, then what motivation is there for a young man to be a good wrestler and go to the Olympics? Because bottom line is, he gets no money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can, if we don't have prestige attached to it, why would you do it? If my son came to me and went, Dad, I'm thinking about becoming a wrestler, but he's really good at MMA, I'd be like, well, go and do the MMA, buddy, or go and do boxing and make some money, because obviously there's a lot of political back and forth for the Olympics, but it's quite a controversial organisation.
Oh, of course. And then, but that's when I think it would be a great idea if we do what the Americans do, which is coupling it with education and scholarships, because that's a big incentive. Because then if your son, like, came and said that, and then they were like, okay, like, you're good enough that you can get, like, a free education to Cambridge, Oxford, one of the best universities in the UK, then it might be, like, something where there's that incentive, and that's a safety net on top of the glory of potentially representing your country in the Olympics as well. So I think there needs to be, you're completely right, in my opinion. I think we should, like, try and model more like the Americans and get it into, like, schools, get it into, like, university sport, so that we can actually couple it with education and potential scholarships, because that will be a massive incentivization. Whereas at the moment, a lot of people are going into, say, mixed martial arts because there's more fame there, and chances of making an income there as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
That's one of the Manic's opponent, Bo Nickal.
Yeah.
That's what he did. He wasn't able to qualify for was it Olympics? And he was beat, and the guy who went on to win it obviously won the Olympics, and he decided to go to MMA because it's seen as an easy option for guys at high level wrestling.
Yeah, so Bo actually has never represented the USA in a world championships or Olympics. So he's never made the world team or the Olympic team. He's only ever had actually one senior event. So in 2019, he became under 23 world champion at that age category. And then it was 2020, it was January 2020, I remember, which was just before the COVID pandemic really, like, kicked off. So sport was still around. And there was a tournament in Rome. And bearing in mind, that was the year where we thought we were going to have the Tokyo Olympics. So this was the beginning of the Olympic year. And Bo had his first senior tournament. And the Americans brought Bo and Kyle Snyder, who was the Olympic champion as well, in the same weight. And I remember the Americans were so excited because the way the bracket worked out was that these two would potentially meet in the quarterfinals, and it would be a good indication of, okay, if Bo can, Bo was the young up-and-comer, Kyle was the reigning Olympic champion. If Bo can potentially beat Kyle, show that he might be able to represent USA in Tokyo. So Kyle and Bo win their first matches quite convincingly, and then Bo meets an Iranian, and I remember Bo, he faced an Iranian in the under-23 final when he became world champion, and he beat him quite handily. So I remember him, like, thinking, I've
got this.
Yeah, I've got this. And he wrestled the Iranian, and it'll be on YouTube, and his name is Mohammed Hossein Mohammadian, and is a friend of mine and an athlete that I work with, and Mohammadian just in 90 seconds just destroyed him, but in a way like that, like you could see like no, like Bo was like, this has never happened to me before, like you could see in his face, single leg, gut wrench, another single leg. It just made, for a guy who's as good as like Bo wrestling, it made, you could see like he was just like shell shocked, like what happened here. And then the Iranian wrestled Kyle Snyder, who everyone, the Americans were hoping Kyle would meet Bo, and then he just pinned Kyle. So like it just the Americans just completely, their dreams got dashed that day. But it's an indication of like the level, because that was his only senior tournament. He never placed, and he never wrestled an international senior tournament again because he couldn't make the Olympic team in the trials in the USA.
And then now he moves over to
and
MMA,
then he moved over to MMA.
You got to fight against them.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is the thing, like, you know, because I know, like, because I don't know if you know this, but one of the only times Bo ever lost in the States was in Madison Square Garden. I don't know if you know this or not.
I don't know that.
Well, grappling match with Gordon Ryan.
No. In wrestling, NCAA, yeah. NCAA because I can't remember if Bo's like a 2-time or 3-time, or he's a multiple-time NCAA champion domestically, but one of the only times he's ever lost in Madison Square Garden. And I know for a fact, because of the guys that, you know, even though I don't know Bo personally, but I'm sure he'll be remembering that, and that'll be playing on his mind, and he'll be probably trying to use that to like try and like say, oh, I want to, like, you know, get a win in that. Yeah, rectify that. But from your perspective, you'll be wanting to know that and say, like, you know, use that energy. Yeah, absolutely. You know, absolutely. Because at that level, you know, at your level, because you're the seasoned MMA fighter in this. You know, he's the wrestler, but you know, this isn't wrestling anymore. Freestyle wrestling is a completely different thing. He's got that skill set, but you're, you know, the seasoned MMA vet, and that is something that I think at this level, when it comes to whether it's Olympics, World Championships, UFC, the psychology is so important. So that is definitely something that, yeah, if I was like, you know, advising you, I'd be like, lean on that for sure, for sure.
See, if you're saying that he lost that tournament, that under 23 bracket, and he never wrestled again, is that seen as a stain on him? And that's why he just went, fuck that, I'm not doing this. I'm not going through this. It's too much almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. So yeah, the under 23 he won, but at senior level, yeah, he never. I mean, he's only done that one tournament, and then which he lost. Is it a stain? I think, you know, if you know wrestling, and especially like the guys that are in the States, they'll know that, you know, he is very, very good. But I remember Daniel Cormier once said something like, you know what, I'd give up my 2 UFC championship belts and my whole, like, you know, MMA career if I could have got Olympic gold. I'd swap it like that.
Really?
Yeah. So
why are they attaching such weight to this? Obviously, we don't have this, so I'm struggling to get my head around this. Like, obviously, they love the sport, but why? What is making them feel this almost shame of lack of success at it? Because Daniel Cormier is one of the greatest MMA fighters ever. Why would he give up such an incredible achievement for a gold medal in the Olympics? And I'm not shitting on gold medals in the Olympics. I'm sure they're great, but it just it's not a followed thing. Like, I'd probably never watch the Olympics.
Yeah, but I think, you know, guys like Bo, guys like, you know, Daniel, it was a childhood thing. You know, they've been wrestling since they were kids, so this is a childhood dream. And in that community, being like an Olympic champion is the pinnacle, you know. And still to this, like, you know, day, like, they will look at guys like Jordan Burroughs, John Smith, stuff like that, like heroes. So it's almost as if you had a childhood dream and you've been working on it, whatever it may be, and you've been working on it your entire life up to, like, you know, early adulthood. And you're so close, but then you're probably, like, say, in a case, someone like Bo, if his nationality was anything else apart from American, Russian, or Iranian, he would be in the Olympics and World Championships, and I think he'd probably get medals. I think he'd probably hit a ceiling when it comes to, like, you know, the gold, but then, like, he's so close, and then it's like, well, what do I do now?
In these countries, that's not close enough.
Yeah. It's not close enough. That's what I mean. There's no. it's literally either that or nothing. It's like, you know,
it's so bizarre.
It's insane, isn't it? It's absolutely insane. And then obviously, so MMA is like this kind of, well, you know, I can still, like, you know, use my skill of wrestling. It's an athletic sport. There's fame and glory attached to it, and I can make money, and I can become a world champion because I never got to become a world champion. I became the domestic champion, I became national champion, all these things, but I never got to become world or Olympic champion. So that's the thing. So I think you hear Henry Cejudo says that a lot. Like, he's still.
I thought you might mention him because obviously he is looked on with like a hero by Daniel Cormier. Chael Sonnen as well. Always mentions his gold medal, and I'm like. Why do they attach this gold medal up there with being a UFC champion? I just can't.
Because I think they appreciate the levels that it takes to actually become Olympic gold like medalist. Because, and if I was to maybe use the best analogy, it would be like maybe like the first time like you went to a BJJ class in an MMA gym or a BJJ gym, and you roll with the purple belt. And remember, you're a white belt, so you're a beginner, and you're like, man, that guy, like. He is absolutely insane. And then after like a few months, like you see that purple belt like get demolished as well by like the black belt. And then you're like, oh man, like if I thought he was insane, so, but like that guy, like, you know, just like demolished him. And then that black belt goes to like, you know, a tournament, and then other black belts, like, you know, it's like, and then you get an appreciation of these levels. And if it's the same with like wrestling. So they will know, like, as good as like Daniel Cormier was excellent, as good as all these other like wrestlers are, some of them never even like, you know, got a chance to go to the Olympics because that's hard enough as it is, let alone it's a gauntlet. It's just a gauntlet, and it's a lifelong gauntlet. And for those that like got to that like, you know, stage and become Olympic champion, let alone double Olympic champion, for them it's just like, wow, like I know what dedication, skill, work and time you have sacrificed to get to this. Like, my hat off to you, because I think Henry still like regards his gold medal higher than his.
I think he does too.
Yeah, just even the way he talks and stuff like that than his UFC championship reigns, which is crazy.
It's very hard for me to get my head around that because I can't compare that to anything else. Like, I don't know anybody who's went to the Olympics. Like, it's just, do you think the Olympics as a whole, or maybe even in Europe, are people starting to maybe see them differently? Because there was a time where the Olympics was very prestigious. Is it maybe losing a bit of that now with obviously the scandal with Russia and there's a lot of other things they've been accused of and caught up with, and I don't know how popular the Paris Olympics was, but it didn't look like it went.
I mean, I know that loads of people spoke highly. I can only really speak about from the wrestling perspective from that sport, but loads of people spoke really highly of how that went. And the thing is that when a lot of these guys, so for example, like there's a wrestler who wrestled in the Tokyo Olympics from Russia. Probably still people think he's the best wrestler currently on the planet. He's Russian. His name is Abdul Rashid Sadulayev, and he got like, you know, so much money afterwards, like when he went back from Dagestan, even from just like Russian billionaires and stuff like that. Other like, you know, national federations, you will get like, you know, looked after and have that hero status. But remember, like, these guys aren't initially doing it for money, because and that's why I think it's so, these guys do become so successful, because that it's almost like doing the hardest thing for the least amount of incentive, or at least the incentive seems like a world away. And then when they get to that,
especially if you're living in rural Russia,
absolutely, or like, you know, Iran or something like that, and so when they finally do get to that, these guys they will be well looked after and treated like gods essentially for the rest of their life, which is interesting.
One of the things I'm aware that you brought into the British GBI wrestling was their concussion policy. A lot of people probably don't realise the concussion rate in wrestling is still high, even though they're not getting struck in the head. It's
still safer than a lot of combat sports because of the lack of that kind of like direct like contact. But, you know, if you're looking at Greco-Roman or even freestyle wrestling, there's a lot. I mean, you guys like have wrestled, so you can appreciate like head position's a big thing. Your head to head, like, you know, contact, you know, the amount of like, you know, the way sometimes you can get taken down. It's high velocity, high impact from really strong guys. concussions can still, happen. So that policy that you speak of, that was put in place mainly for in an environment where like you're in a club, and it can be used actually for an MMA gym or as well, because it's for an environment where there is no doctor or healthcare practitioner there, where someone's like, okay, can know just basically what are the signs and symptoms of someone that may have concussion, and if there's any doubt, you pull them out. So it's good in that sense, because if it used properly, you can avoid serious problems. Because the problem with concussion is that then you're more prone to concussion again if it can happen and it's not detected early. And if you're not having the right return to play policies, then it can really be a big problem.
It's something that should be brought in like all over for when I think about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And it's although it starts in the mat, there's still the head collisions, there's still the slams, there's still two people smashing each other. When you think
We've done it loads of times, me and you.
When you think about rugby, and people are getting concussion from getting hit. When you're a wrestling athlete, the chances of getting hit are much higher than a rugby player. And it was I was astonished that wasn't brought in until
it was always there.
Like, why has that not always been there?
I know, and it's still, a lot of other countries probably still don't have something, at least for like wrestling, but this is the thing, I think, like say like sports medicine, sports science, a lot of the sports that, get that kind of expertise tend to be the more mainstream sports. So football, tennis, rugby. I'm friends with Dr. Jeff Davidson, who's the UFC chief medical officer, and when we talk, we describe ourselves we're unicorns, because there's not that many doctors that get the culture of the athlete, because I think MMA fighter, wrestler is, it's different. It's not just like, you have to be an athlete, but be like, the mentality, the personality, that fight that you have to have in you, and being able to like, deal with like, that athlete and help them from like, optimizing their health and performance, keeping them safe is very different things, and it's very important things. But there's not many of us, as Jeff says, we're unicorns really, and that it's a shame, because I would love for that knowledge to be more like widespread, so that really MMA is and wrestling has become so much more optimal and elite when it comes to athlete health and safety and performance.
Are some of these guys too tough to take on health and safety advice? Do you get what I mean? They don't want to hear it. We do it like this, and because this is what we do here.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is that they maybe from like say age of like 18 or something have been told wrong information from their coach that was passed down from some bro science that like they heard from somewhere else, and then when it gets to like a certain age, because this is the thing, like you might be really, really successful and like have like the achievements. It doesn't mean you're doing everything right. Still doesn't mean you're doing everything right.
There's a lot of athletes doing well in spite of that, absolutely, and I know that firsthand. But what happens is that, say, the up and coming or athlete that wants to be that guy says, oh, he does that, so like I'm gonna do that, and then it's like, okay, don't look at the good things he does, because that one is not good, and it can be a trouble. But like I think really appreciating, I know, because the athletes that I work with, like they initially, if those that initially may have like some skepticism or something, they have an appreciation because I understand the sport of wrestling, or I understand like MMA, and then they see what I say like works, and it's like, okay, give it a try, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's like, and then it's about building that relationship and building that trust, because I think that's the most important thing from any relationship, whether that's coach, athlete, sports doctor, athlete, is building that like like trust and safety in terms of being able to like exchange information that way. Do you find it going through to younger athletes easier than older ones?
Definitely.
Is there still a sort of caveman style attitude attached to the older guys?
I don't know if caveman is the right word, but I think
I like the bro science.
Yeah.
Bro science is excellent.
Bro science.
Swear by it.
God, I hate it. I hate it. But that's the thing. It's they may have seen a clip on YouTube or Instagram, and that's the thing. They'll say like, okay, they'll see, oh, that UFC fighter said this, and that UFC coach, and they're successful, and they're like, they just attribute that. But it's like, okay, but that's not their area of expertise, like he and actually that's wrong what they're saying, you know, and that is definitely like a problem. I think in even like at your level, Paul, like I would say 90% of like UFC fighters are not training like, you know, correctly, and I don't mean that in terms of the
overreaching.
Overtraining is like a big thing. I don't think they may not even realize they're overtraining, but you know, one of the things that I do a lot with like some teams and like athletes that I work with is about periodization. Periodization is so important at elite level sport, because if you want to be UFC, to peak, you know, because you don't need to be the best MMA fighter in the world 365 days a year to be world champion. You just need to be the best on those days that you're competing, you know, and that's something that's really, really, and that's why I say to athletes, it's a bit of a light bulb that you don't need to do that. And I think some still like, you know, high intensity every single day, and then they overtrain, and then they underperform when it comes to competition. Some just don't really like, you know they don't have structures of their training programs, when to like, you know, go low, when to like high, but it's all about peaking at the right time. It's so crucial, because and that's why loads of times it's like, you know, people are like, oh, I can't believe like such and such lost to such and such, because I know like he's better than them, and it's like, but he wasn't better than them in the day, and it's probably like, you know, due to multifactorial things like, you know, did sleep, psychology, nutrition, weight cut, but massively in combat sports such as like MMA and wrestling, massively important, because the technique and all that, especially like I would say like UK is a really, really good like place for MMA. It's not, you know, there's loads of very good like, you know, MMA gyms and good coaches, and you can get that high standard when it comes, again, good level of coaching in MMA. So the technique is actually probably like for coaches the easy part, but it's then, you know, trying to like, you know, factor in psychology, all those other things, and periodization of when, like, you know, actually to train at what level, and it's so important.
One of the things I use is a Oura ring.
Right, okay.
So it tracks your HRV to tell you.
Okay.
But there's days where, not getting into the bro science, but there's days where like on my program it says I should be doing this. And sometimes I just have to do it, because mentally I feel if I don't do it, that I've let myself down. And I'm like, so there's days where I've went out and I've ran and I've gave it my all, and I felt even worse coming off that treadmill. But it is that bro science, and it's that mental, and it's hard to get through to me as a professional athlete, but it's hard to get through to these young kids. And if they're looking up to guys like me, guys who are in these gyms and wrestling gyms as well, it doesn't matter. He was out.
He done it. Exactly.
And he just keeps going.
And he keeps winning.
Yeah.
So how can he be wrong? Because he wins.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. It is tough, eh?
And it was like, you think about like our first couple of weight cuts that you did as a light heavyweight with the bro science, but now they're starting to
just guessing.
It's starting to now filter down, and we're having nutritionists, we're having guys at elite level who are passing on knowledge. Is that filtering down into UK wrestling? Or the guys just making huge cuts as well?
Well, I've definitely like, you know, made changes in that regard, especially with like, you know, the team that like say back in 2022 Birmingham Commonwealth Games, that team I worked with when they were leading up to the games, both the Scottish guys and the English guys. But I actually think it's a lot better in wrestling now, and because I work with United World Wrestling too overall. But when I work with in MMA, I still think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done from that aspect, because I don't know, you can maybe Ross, Paul, you can tell me, but I don't know many like, you know, fighters that even know, or coaches that really know about periodization, or at least if they know about it, know what they're doing correctly to peak at those like, you know, right times, because it's different. So like when I'm working with like wrestlers, they, you know, we know like from a year before that, whether it's a world championships or Olympics, that's like, you know, your 2 days, like, you know, that we're going to like, you know, work for. So that whole year is focused on there. And then, so we're training 365 days a year as an athlete. It doesn't mean like you're going hard like all those like days, and there's different splits of what we're focusing on, like the right time to like, you know, do strength training, and there's a wrong time to do strength training where you could like, you know, make yourself prone to injury and like overtrain. But I've seen like, I know guys, MMA guys, UFC guys that like, I'll see that they're like doing the wrong weight training 3 weeks out from like a fight, and I'm like, why? You're not even going to get strength gains from that. Why are you doing strength training like that? You're just only going to, you know, I know for a fact your calories are low. I know that you're going to be dehydrated as well. Why are you doing that, making yourself prone to injury and all these like different like things? And I think there's still that big like philosophy. If I just train hard, like, you know, all the time, I'm going to be, that's the best thing I can do. But that's not the best thing you can do. There's a right way. We're in the year 2024 and there's science to this now, and there's a right way of like doing things like properly and proper way to peak and proper way to periodize. And I know it can be difficult with, say, like an MMA fighter because you don't have those dates, but you could roughly, like, you know, say I'm working right now with Reese McEwen on this, and he's seen big benefits when it's coming to this of how his body's feeling physically and mentally in terms of his periodization of peaking, and we've been working since probably January. And he's noticed a massive difference.
So he's doing like a sort of mesocycle and then like a smaller cycle?
So Reese came to me in this, I think he came to me after he lost his Cage Warriors title fight last November. And it was his wrestling coach that recommended me to him, and he got in touch with me and basically said, look, I know you work with Olympic champions, world champions. I've just lost my world championship fight. I want to know what I need to do in terms of, from an athletic point of view, to be the best that I can be. And I spoke to him, and I like basically was quite harsh with him actually, because I asked him what he's doing or how he trains, like, and I essentially said, okay, I know you've been a professional for, well, I think his record at that point was like 7-1 or 7-2 or something. I was like, I know you've been a professional for God knows how many years, but I don't think you've ever actually trained like a professional athlete. And Reese's face just drops. And I said to him, there's a proper way of, like, you know, doing things. Okay, so we're thinking that you're going to be training, like, you know, your next fight is going to be in 19 weeks. I'm going to build an entire, like, you know, day by day, like, you know, regime for you of what to do, like, in those, like, you know, 19 weeks. And it's not, and I'm not the guy that's going to say, like, you know, oh, this is how you throw a jab cross, this is how you, like, do an armbar. That's not my remit. Those are your coaches and all of that. But in terms of, like, the intensity of your training sessions, how to, like, you know, break it up, when to, like, you know, do strength, when not. And then he noticed that he just felt so much better, even just like psychologically, by having a structure. Because before, I still think that this is, and you can tell me, Paul, I hear that, like, say a UFC fighter has his date and he's like, okay, cool, 8-week camp, I'm going to do that, or whatever, 12-week, 8-week, whatever. And then that's it. But when you're not in camp, what are you doing? Because coaches are telling me that their fighters are not training. And that, to me, from coming from an Olympic kind of background, athletic background, is crazy for me. You know? That
does sound crazy.
That's me, though.
The vast majority of guys that I've trained with train that 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. And the intensity, as you're talking about, it's through the roof. It's always, let's go 100 miles an hour. And you've maybe got multiple coaches. You've maybe got like a jiu-jitsu coach, boxing coach, wrestling coach, strength and conditioning, and they all want their pound of flesh for you. And it's difficult to kind of manage that. So how are you finding that work moving forward with someone like Reese, who's he's in Grip House, so he's working with a number of different coaches as well as conditioning guys. How are you managing that?
So it's a good point. He's a good example because he splits his time between Wales and he trains with Shore MMA as well as the Grip House in Glasgow. And it was very important that I told, like, Reese that what he needs to do is that there needs to be communication between everyone involved. He needs to feel that there's, like, you know, a complete team, like, you know, behind him. That's completely fair that everyone's got their own remit and everything. But when it comes to, I'm happy to, like, communicate with your strength and conditioning coach, wrestling coach. Everyone needs to, like, have, even if it's just creating a WhatsApp group, and then everyone's, like, you know, chipping in, so that even if you're feeling psychologically that, you know, okay, I've got a team here, that everyone's, like, you know, there. And then it was very important that when I told Reese that, you know, and I think what was nice about, for me, was that I didn't have any affiliation to a gym. I didn't have, it wasn't like this plan that I was making, like, say, was from the Grip House and was going to Shore MMA and then, or or back and forth, so that people were like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do it like that person.
There was
even
no
though I don't,
gym politics.
yeah, there was no gym politics. Even though I don't think I think they're quite good like that. I don't think they would have been like that. But the point is that there wasn't. It was coming from. It was like, oh, okay, this is coming from the Olympic wrestling, like, you know, doctors like that. So there was this kind of like apolitical, but also like they were like, okay, he knows what he's talking about, so they followed it. And then the beauty of it was that they all seen the results, so that everyone was like making comments about it, and then they saw, wow, like, you know, this is really working. And then even like, you know, fair play, like Dean Riley, like got in touch with me, and he asked me, I'd love to learn more, because I'm seeing the work you're doing with Reese, and I'd love to know a little bit more of how I can implement this in the gym and things like that. So it's I think that's what I mean. It's about building trust, because results build trust, but it takes time. It takes time.
You don't get results in days.
No. Rome wasn't
as you're
built in a
saying,
day.
19 weeks, is that we've been working?
Yeah. So that,
but
then after that, like, it was like straight after that, this is your plan up until next time, you know. So it's basically, he's got, and for someone like Reese, who's quite, he likes structure, it was perfect for him, you know, like, because he didn't have to like worry about, okay, what am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing next week? Well, you know, he knows, it's just stick to the plan, and you'll see the results.
Do you do, sorry, do you do sports psychology as well?
A little bit of it, but I'm not a sports psychologist myself. But because I've worked with so many good ones, and as we're saying, like in sports like wrestling and MMA, it's not like a football club where they have your sportsmen, they have everything. These resources are lacking. So sometimes I've found that I need to be like, you know, in that place where like I can, like, you know, implement that. And I found it really, really, really interesting myself, because at that level of sport, you know, elite sport, the mental side cannot be like, you know, forgotten about. But it is a lot, even in countries like we're talking about, like Russia and Iran. It's a bit taboo. They're starting to now, like, you know, get into it a little bit, but they're still light years behind. And so I do work with, like, you know, some of the wrestlers and like even athletes, MMA fighters, like, on that, because it's small details at this level. Winning and losing it's not about big things. It's always about small details, small adjustments, and it can be the difference. And I don't downplay sports psychology at all.
It was a massive change within my plan when I started working with a sports psychologist, and it was just for a long time not seen as a weakness, but I imagine that's what it's like in these places like Russia.
I think it was. I think it was. I'll hand on heart. The first time I went to a sports psychologist, I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And the only reason I went was because Paul went, or I never would have done it.
Interesting.
No chance. I would never have. If anybody, like, I remember telling my dad, I went to see a sports psychologist, and I'll not repeat what he said, but he called me a gay slur, for going to a sports psychologist. Wow. And that was just the attitude, and that's what I can imagine it still being. It's mental. See, now I think of it, I'm like, what a fucking idiot. Like, it's because it's your whole, it is attached to your overall performance. It is under the umbrella of performance. And why is there this resistance to it? And then especially what you're saying, the sort of the cultural, the main man in an Iranian society or Russian society, how do you get him to go, by the way, I had to see a sports psychologist there. How do you make that mainstream? How do you tell him you've got to take your foot off the gas? You can't train 365 days a year like that because we've got to periodize.
Absolutely.
That's quite a tough.
It is. It's super tough. But one of the good things that you just pointed out there is that you said that I done it because Paul done it, you know, and like,
or I never would have,
or you never would have.
Okay.
So that's one of the like big things. What I'm doing is like, you know, I'm working with some like, you know, really big names, and then it's like, okay, like, wow, like such and such is like, you know, doing it. So it kind of normalizes, or it like makes it like a bit okay. But it's crazy, like what you're saying. Like, I'm sure if you went to your dad and said, oh, I went today to a strength and conditioning coach, I went today to a nutritionist, he wouldn't have called you.
No, nothing.
But it's the same, if not, in my opinion, the most important. The most important, so, you know. I'm sure you guys, like, if I say this, we'll have names that pop up in here. How many guys do you know who's like the man in the gym, and then when it comes to like, you know,
there's a lot.
Like,
I already know what you're going to say.
I'm sure when it comes to like, you know, stepping in the cage, they're not the same person, and I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 is up here. It's all due to like, you know, this, and we're now, as I say, this is no longer caveman times. We're now in an age where, like, you know, you can actually work on this, like, you know, and work on it very effectively
and quickly.
And
like
quickly,
it's a very quick fix.
To show emotion has predominantly been seen as a negative for males. But over the last, I believe in the last few years, you've definitely seen a massive change in that. There's a lot of companies out there who are like showing that it's okay to talk about your feelings, and even on your podcast, like when we're speaking to some of the guys and it's getting emotional for them, it's good for other people to see that it's not just
absolutely.
like, I just got up, like, so if I lost my fight, I just brushed it off and I went away, and I'll just suppress all that stuff.
I was just David Goggins, eh? That is one of the problems, though, isn't it? Like, that's not really a good attitude to have.
No. But it's not even just about, you know, because it's such a vast umbrella. It's about, okay, nerves is normal. There's not one, and I've worked with, as I say, Olympic and world champions. There's not one that doesn't have nerves. There's not one that's just like a robot, okay? But it's about how you manage those nerves. It's about then, you know, visualization, self-talk, all different kinds of, like, you know, techniques out there that can really, really, really change from you being, I don't even like using the word nervous. I always say excitement with, like, you know, because even just little things like putting positive, like, you know, like refinements on like words, because it's powerful. It really is powerful, and it can completely change the way you, like, you know, feel when you're about to step into competition. And that's the thing, because all I say to, like, you know, my athletes is that you can do everything right, but you'll still never become Olympic and world champion. But the only way to, like, you know, give yourself and maximize your chances to, like, you know, do that is to, like, you know, do everything. Why would you sell yourself short? You train so hard, you train so, you sacrifice, you do this. Why are you not, like, you know, focusing on some other aspects to make you so much better and then become the best that you can be? Really, honestly.
Are you having a tough time converting people?
I think I've got to a stage where I'm now selective of who I work with as well, to be honest.
Can you just tell there's ones who are not...
Yeah, if I'm honest.
Not going to buy it.
There's ones where it's like, okay, this will be wasting my time and your time, you know, and...
How do you make that judgment?
Well, we'll have an initial, like, you know, consultation and talk, and if... I think it's really important. It always makes a big difference if it's coming from the athlete. Like, say, Reese, for example, like, he came to me and said, look, I know I've just lost. I want to get better. I'm open to change. Perfect. That kind of attitude I can work with all day. But people that maybe have, like, so say, like, reached the heights, but then like go down and then want to reach back again, they're like, I've been good. I've done all these things and I've become UFC champion. You know what I mean? I don't need someone to tell me what to do. You get it all the time. And then if they're body language, that kind of language, you know, you need openness. I think it's really important in any kind of relationship with an athlete, whether you're a coach, whether you're someone like me, that where also I, like, you know, like, I don't say to, like, it's not a dictatorial thing here. I'm saying, like, tell me, like, give me feedback, Reese. I'm always here. Tell me, like, if I'm, you know, if this part is, like, you know, not working for you, that, and then, but that relationship is really the way to, like, you know, grow. I think for coaches as well, like, in general, it's such an important thing, like that kind of openness and trust.
The athlete feedback.
Completely.
Is there ever times though an athlete's going to give you feedback and you go, no, you're wrong?
Yeah, loads of times.
Is that common?
Loads of times, yeah. But I'd rather they say it rather than keep it in their head and let it fester and then think, and then maybe not adhere to, like, you know, plan, because their point of view may be just from due to not seeing the results instantaneously, or there may be something else, and it may be just like, okay, it's not that this is wrong, but you just need to, like, you know, stick this bit out, or actually, like, this bit we need to tweak here. So it happens all the time. But I think I always say this, like, there's no benefit of just having yes men around you all the time. You want, you know, if you've got that inner circle, you really want people who are going to make you grow, make you better. And that's not always challenge you. Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't think any, like, you know, an elite athlete, wrestler, MMA fighter is ever as bad as their worst loss, and their best win they can always be better than, you know. And you see it, I see it all the time, like this kind of, one of the big contrasts that is actually quite visually impressive, and I see is in UFC in Manchester in July, I was with Jeff Davidson. We were together, and you'll know this, Paul, but like immediately after when you your fight finishes, both winner and loser go straight into the medical. They go into like, you know, in Manchester it was like a curtain, like, and so it wasn't like, you know, two separate rooms, and they go in and then winner and loser, and then we'll always go to loser first because to like do the medical, and then into the winner. But see the difference in emotions, the difference in atmosphere, like it's like literally heaven and hell. And I find it fascinating because not many other sports is so dramatic and catastrophic when or is glorious, like, you know, glorious in the wins and like catastrophic in like the losses. And obviously it's quite raw then, so but afterwards I think it's important for, like, say the coaches after a good win not to just butter up your athlete, but actually say, okay, great, but we're going to get better here, you know what I mean? Because you're trying to like get, even if you say you become a UFC champion, it's not, the end goal isn't that, it's retaining it and then like going on and on and on and on. So it's really, really, really important that you have those kind of trusting, like, you know, relationships of someone who can be able to tell you that without your ego getting hurt, or, you know, feeling that like if I say this to them, like, you know, they might fire me or something like that. Like,
do you ever have to think like that, or do you feel you can be quite blunt with all the guys you work with? Are you quite blunt?
Yeah, I am because I think
you come across like you would just listen, I'm telling you.
Yeah, because then why am I here? Am I here just to, like, you know, stroke your ego? Or am I here to make you better? You know, that's that.
I've seen it with Paul before with Lee. I remember Lee having to stand up to you a bit like before when it was getting close to weight cut time, and I remember sitting there thinking like, I don't know how Lee's going to play this one, but it's because it can be quite a tough position you're in. You're working with a guy who. Quite a violent guy. He might just, and it's obviously very tense. So you've got to have that about you where you can just have the relationship already built to a point where this guy knows what I'm talking about. And although he's in a bad mood now, he has to just trust me and believe this is in his best interest.
Absolutely. So, and I think, like, you know, you can, it's about knowing when and where to say something as well. Like if I think like something's that, there's never really anything where you have to be very, like, you know, vital and you have to say it then and there. So if someone really is, like, you know, like in the middle of a weight cut, I'm not going to be like saying, oh, Paul, like, you know, like you could really work on that tech, you know what I mean? Like that would be, you know, you have to have a bit of sense and wherewithal, you know, of when to say things. But in general, like, why I know athletes that, like, they've come to me and they've, like, their relationships with coaches have deteriorated because they're like, their coaches say to them, after the loss, they were like, oh, you know what, I did actually think during the camp X, Y, and Z. And it's like, why did you not? Yeah, why didn't you tell? Where are you just telling this to me now because I've lost? Is this like a kind of, are you trying to like remove responsibility, like here? What's going on? Like, why? If you had thoughts like this, why didn't you say this now? And that, but so that's an awful. I feel like if whether it's coach feel not comfortable or the athlete, then that's obviously indicative of not a great athlete-coach relationship. So I think that's really important for good success.
And what's your sort of main factors for cultivating a good relationship with somebody?
I think they need to feel safe in the fact that they can share any information with me and know that it'll be confidential. Number one, I think that's really, really important. Like that they've got a safe space, whether it's regarding, you know, their, you know, because maybe like sometimes my work can be just like they come to me and they're like, you know, my coach done this, and I'm like, okay, you know, they just want to, like, you know, vent, but they know that this isn't going to go to,
it's going to stay with
it's going to stay with me, but that will make them just feel like, you know, a lot like better. So I think creating that safe space for them is really, really, really important, and that comes through, I think, well, they'll have maybe like, you know, I'll use Reeson as an example here because I was recommended to him for his wrestling coach, and I'd worked with a wrestling coach, and he said, so there's already that like element of, I know someone who's worked with you that's like, you know, is recommending you there, and then you can build like, you know, a trust and like, you know, relationship. But it's really important, and also character recognition. Not every fighter or every athlete is this. Everyone's different, and knowing what I always want to know when I'm working with like someone, I always ask, because if you've got to, like, say the UFC, if you've got to, like, you know, you're an Olympic like level athlete, I ask, what makes you different? You know, because there's something that makes you different, which means there's got you to the place that you've got to. And I think, especially when you're in this hamster wheel of being an athlete and just like, you got fights, you got competitions, you can sometimes forget, actually, I've done a lot to like, get here. There's been a lot of like, like one of the really nice exercises that I like to use from a sports psychology point of view is the highlight reel of, I tell the athlete to really create your own highlight reel for yourself to remember what's got you like, here. So if we use Paul as an example, it could be your last like second submission of Ankalaev, the fact your main event, all these different things to remember, like, yeah, like, because you can forget, like, I actually have done quite a lot here. I've got a lot of achievements that's put me here, and I've got a huge milestone of going to Madison Square Garden, and that point of like the psychology of like where you're going to be for those 15 minutes, like, can change your trajectory. So it's really important.
The hamster wheel's a really good analogy because it can be quite a monotonous pursuit. Eh?
For sure. Like, going in, going out, training. It's hard. It's hard. It's really hard. All sports hard, but I really do think like wrestling and MMA. It's multi-dimensional. It's tough. It's you're not doing it for fun. Or rarely doing it for fun. So it can be a real grind.
Wrestling is one of these sports. Like, we wrestle on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and it's one of the. See, if somebody had said to me, listen, Paul, don't have to come in, class is cancelled, I'd be like, it's so tough. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It humbles you. When you think like, oh, I'm really strong, I'm really athletic, I can beat MD in these moments, and then suddenly just something changes and you're on your back, or you're pinned, or you're in the turtle position. It humbles you so quickly. It's one of the hardest disciplines within all the MMA.
It was always the 2-minute rounds that got me. So, right, we're going to set the timer at 2-minute rounds. And I just think, 2 minutes, that's so fast. Nothing. And you've never been as tired in your life. Like, can we not just do 5 fives? Because there's not, it's just go.
There's no rest in wrestling.
No, I can't imagine what it would be like to be at one of these high-level university teams where you have to go in and do that every day. Like, I can see guys just go, fuck this. Yeah. I'm not going through this every day.
Well, it leads back to that thing why Daniel Cormier and these guys hold it in such high regard, because they've seen what it's like on the mats in these separate universities. And then when you take that from there to put it into a moment of, we're now in an area. So you went from university to an area, from an area to like maybe the whole of the US, and then from that there's all these different camps, and I think that's where it comes for, like, that's why you get the recognition.
And it's not just that. When you're a young man at uni, you can't be in the gym every day and then out drinking with the girls all night. So you're doing one or the other. Like, it's not just that, it's what you missed out on. That probably, that makes it make more sense now, because what would you want to be doing at 19? Do you want to be rolling about the mats with a bunch of sweaty guys? Or do you want to be out having a nice time, It's
what's steroid abuse like in the sport of wrestling from the UK to the world level? Because I think visually, when you look at somebody, he kind of fails the visual test, and I know there is obviously there's Clean Sport with the UFC, USADA, WADA. There's all these different organisations, but what's it like within wrestling?
So I do some work with this with United World Wrestling. Their drug testing agency is called the ITA, International Testing Agency. They're quite good. Look, in all sports at this level, it's very prevalent. It is very prevalent, and in terms of drug use, I would say like for like a sport where strength is such a big factor, steroids is a part of it. Sadly, I think that the anti-doping agencies are always, we're always trying to play catch up. Because of the technology and everything like that. Like, for example, one of my friends, he participated in the 2012 London Olympics and he got bronze. And then 6 or 7 years later, they done retesting of the samples. So initially they tested all 3 medalists and everything was fine. And then they done retesting, and then it turned out that both silver and gold were positive for like,
banned substances.
Yeah, banned substances. And I think it was steroids. I can't remember for sure, but I think it was. So then he, like 10 years, almost 9 years after his Olympic bronze medal, gets awarded Olympic gold.
But it's not the same.
But of course, you've robbed that person of, that moment, their lives could have changed, both because no one's then giving them financial incentives like 10 years later. So you've robbed someone of what their life could be. So I look at it like almost like theft, really, because you are, and then sports like MMA where like you're punching someone in the face and causing, there's ethical things about it as well. So I'm completely anti it. But it's rife. It is rife, and all a drug testing agency can do is just try and update their science and technology and be so robust in their testing to be able to catch as many people as they can. But you'll never catch them all, sadly.
Do you think there's a way to change that attitude? Because obviously amongst athletes, it's pretty pro PEDs.
Yeah, I mean,
guys are pretty up for it.
I think it's because of the way they look at it, because they only see the potential benefits of, okay, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to be faster and recover better to get better at competition and get the success money, whatever it is. But they don't appreciate the health, adverse effects that can occur, because they don't see those athletes that in their 60s, you only see them when they are Olympic champions and they're super buff and everything. They see all the good stuff. But I think so that education is WADA and the ITA are doing a lot of it with athletes, and it does filter through to some, but it's a challenge because it's the shiny, right? Like you're showing them something that's not that attractive. It's like, okay, heart failure, heart attacks, kidney failure. But then it's like, oh, but look at this. Like if you take this,
the gold is the one, eh?
The gold is the one.
Like there's such emphasis put on being number one.
Oh,
like if someone's turning around and saying, you lose a point here, you're bringing shame to the family. It doesn't seem like that hard a choice.
Yeah, it's insane. I don't know any other sport that's even like this. Like even if you're say, I don't know, that it's like you're either number one or almost nothing. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Aye, but that is what would almost again incentivize. Like when you think the amount of footballers who are using PEDs, of course, if you're wrestling, if you're boxing, if you're in MMA, and I don't know how stringent the testing is, but if you think you can get away with it, probably just going to do it.
Yeah, there's people that I think that it'd be naive to think that there's not, it's not happening.
But it's about the information that you use as the Olympics for wrestling. It's passing on to these guys and trying to inform them that it's not just about the then and now. It's about the 30 years down the line. What health implications have you got?
And it won't even be 30 years. It'll be a couple of years or
And the Olympics is at a nation-wide level. Like that's the reason the Russians are having to compete under different flags, isn't it? Because they had a state-sponsored doping program.
Well, at the moment, it's mainly due to the Ukraine-Russia war.
Ukraine war. Right?
Yeah. So that's the main thing. But look, and it's not even the visual test or looking at certain countries. It's almost impossible just to say. You just have to test and be vigorous about it and try and catch any suspected characters as well.
It's a tough one.
It's super tough.
And it's constant in MMA as well.
Yeah, I think apart from UFC, do any other organizations even test?
PFL test.
Do they?
Piss test.
PFL done a urine test one of their events, and I think they ended up with half their roster.
The whole light heavyweight division went.
Really?
The whole everyone.
So that was just like a competition test in competition, yeah.
So it was like a day of urine test.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh.
they got every single guy.
There you go.
Every single light heavyweight in the tournament. Aye, but then there's the other side of it where you go, well, everyone else is doing it, so I might have to. Like I can see how someone would feel that way. Like all the other guys are doing it.
Yeah, no, I know they feel as though
if I don't, I definitely won't win.
But some of the MMA guys that I've worked with is like, look, you need to realize that you've signed up to a sport where, apart from now you're seeing PFL, but they don't have a program, right? PFL don't have a program, no. So apart from UFC, most organizations, you're going to be going up against people where this is legal. It's not illegal, So they have chosen to do this, but you've signed up to be part of this as well. now from both an ethical point of view, but mainly from your own health point of view, because you're not going to be thanking yourself in 10 years' time after doing this, trust me. You're going to have to make that decision, and it can only be you that's making that decision. But I mean, I seen something even the other day. It was something about like Donald Cerrone's going to come back to the UFC, but he's openly said that he's been using steroids
for
basically for however long. He's like, and then I was thinking to myself, wow, like, you know, so if that happened in wrestling, that wouldn't happen in wrestling. Put it that way. Yeah, no,
wouldn't be allowed back.
If someone said that there'd be an adverse doping violation right there and then, but right now he's saying he is, but somehow he's going to come back. I don't know what's going on there, but I don't think that's a good look for the sport.
He's got to test clean for a certain number of months, and then
But he still openly used like performance enhancing drugs for which
he
has
still received the benefit.
Yeah, he received the benefit. Yeah, absolutely. And so, in terms of the fairness, or at least if that's something that's allowed, then surely other athletes will look and see, okay, there's massive loopholes here, you know, and they'll exploit that. It is a massive loophole. They'll exploit that. And that I just don't think it's a good look for the sport, when especially everything we've been talking about today is trying to optimize and elevate the standards and level of mixed martial arts from that point of view.
One other thing I'm interested in at the moment, we always hit these times within the gym where it may be coming from summer into winter or winter into summer. And there seems to be a massive influx in things like infections, staph infection. How can the guys in the gym, and it might just be something as simple as just wash regularly, but is there anything that the guys in the gym can be doing from what wrestlers do to improve gym hygiene and the chance to reduce staph?
Yeah. So there's definitely one of the things that springs to mind is there's a specific, I'll maybe be able to find it for you guys later, but there's a specific type of antibacterial like soap that you can use to clean the mats. I think having the actual gym environment, like, you know, properly, like, you know, cleaned and sterilized is very important. If you are doing, as you said it yourself, Paul, it's not rocket science. If you're doing the basic things such as washing before and after training, you know, not using, you know, the same sweaty rash guard like 100 times over and over again. The mats are clean, and then, okay, that minimizes it, but it can still happen. But then if you notice anything, whether it's like a rash or, you know, anything, if you're not feeling that well, then get it, like, you know, like, just be careful, get checked out. Yeah, you know, you don't want to be, because I know like stories, and I know guys that like, it's, by the time like they're getting checked out, they need full on IV antibiotics, and it's like, that's just bang on dangerous for them, but also not just for you, but for people that you're rolling with. So you've got responsibility and care, and in my opinion, for your teammates.
You think about it at that top level when you see fighters who are maybe doing their fight pictures, or we seen Kevin Lee walking out.
Yeah, I remember that.
A big, massive staph infection.
I remember
and
that.
It's like, so if
That's
this
crazy.
is at the top level, and the mats are always cleaned and all this kind of stuff, but it just seems to be a certain time of the year it just kind of flips on. And you know,
some people I think are mega susceptible to it as well. As soon as I spot one person with it in the gym, like, I guarantee that next day I've got it. And just like, it's the second I see it, I'll just be like, oh no. And then the next day I'm not well. Like, and I know it's just working at night time all the time. You're random. You're probably not eating as good as you should, and your own body just doesn't fight off this stuff. Do
you recommend pre and probiotics to kind of help that?
Well, I mean, like, obviously you can take antibiotics and it will, like, you know, reduce your risk, but
puts you in bed for a week.
But what would be the duration of that? Because if you're, you know, you can potentially get staph at any time, like, of training. I wouldn't recommend an athlete to be on antibiotics just as a set standard. I think really there is a responsibility that comes to the person, the training partners, and those athletes of, you know, because it's not something that's hidden, right? You can see it, or you can 100%. See it, like, you know, developing, but then you're like, okay, it might be nothing, or you're ignoring it, and then by the time you're going, like, you know, 4 other people in the gym got it spread, we can nip this in the bud straight away if, like, you just, like, don't go
Stay
to
home.
the gym. yeah, like, just don't go to the gym for a little bit, you know, and then it'll be a lot better for you as well as your teammates.
Is it still the same in wrestling, in the community of wrestling?
Yeah, it can be, but I think because there's, so as part of like my pre weigh-in medical, if I see something on you, you're not competing. You know, so it doesn't matter if it's the Olympics, if it's a World Championships. So that's something that we've put in place so that they know that. So their coaches are the ones that are on them, you know, not even necessarily because they're looking out for their athlete's health, but because they're like,
they want them competing.
Yeah, they want them competing. So like they know now that if there's anything like that, they won't be competing. So that's really become a good disincentive for, good deterrent for it, very much so. Even equally, like a deterrent that we've put in place is that like World Championships will be, your first matches will be on day 1, and then if you get to the finals, it'll be day 2. You have to weigh in on both days, the morning of, and then that's really been a deterrent for big weight cuts, because for someone who's, as you guys have done weight cuts, what's worse than doing one weight cut is doing 2 consecutive.
Say the same thing every time, never doing this again.
Yeah. So people are just like, so that's actually really like got rid of like big like weight cuts, thankfully, and people are just like competing more close to their natural weight, which is really good. And it's also stopped. We've noticed a drop in diuretic doping use because of that too, which was fascinating.
Not that common in MMA, the diuretic use, I don't think.
No?
Nah, I don't know many guys who know much about it, to be honest.
Okay.
But it's
I'm oblivious to it if you want to film it.
Just makes you fucking all the water come out, it just makes you piss and piss and piss and piss.
Oh wow.
Diuretics, very popular with bodybuilders, and wrestlers.
But
wrestlers love them,
absolutely, because it's a doping, but it's on the doping list, and it's a way to, like, you know, classically they used to say, okay, I'll take this and you'll, like, you know, lose fluid easier to, like, for weight cutting purposes,
and to help you pass doping tests as well.
But it's on the
now it's banned.
But it's on the banned substance list. Yeah.
Can the IV wrestlers to rehydrate?
No,
that's banned as well.
No, it's banned. So that's something that a lot of certain countries are unhappy with, but it's banned. The reason for that being on the WADA prohibited list is mainly because, what else is in there? Is it not? Is it saline or is it something else?
And it bypasses testing, because it's going in through the vein.
Absolutely. So that's the big thing. It's more the route of administration rather than that. And also the evidence is that if you're wanting to rehydrate properly, then even for some of those like bigger weight cuts, then oral rehydration done properly is just as, like, you know, good. There's like, this is what I mean, like, one of the things that I've also put in place for United World Wrestling is a hydration policy and guidance. So there's very easy, like, formulas of what rate and how much to, like, you know, replenish your fluids and with what for each training session. So all my athletes will check their weight before a training session, check their weight after, and then I'll give them the calculation, and then they'll replenish that. And they're not, because there's acute dehydration when, okay, you're maybe doing a bit of a weight cut and stuff like that, and that's part of the parcel with that. But like kind of gradual chronic dehydration is also a phenomenon that, like, really hampers performance as well. And that's something that I've put in place, and it's been really good.
That's been the big one with me, the rehydration after weight cuts. Like, I can remember going a full 24 hours after weight cutting and still not been for a piss yet. And thinking, like, I've done this wrong. I'm in trouble here. Like, I've got this badly wrong. I'm no well. And then I'm still no going to and I'm like getting close to fighting. Bro, 100%. Bro science it. Like, I'm getting close to fight time now, and I've still not even been to the toilet. Like, this is bad, And just didn't matter how much this couldn't.
My worst enemy, bro science.
What is your best experience you've experienced? What your job has brought you?
I mean, so back at the beginning of what we were talking about, you know, some of these Iranian guys are, as I say, like, they're idolized, like Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo and stuff like that. I have the pleasure of, like, calling some of these guys personal friends now, and they come to me and, like, will drop me a line and I'll advise them. I find that a huge honor, you know, something cool to, like, you know, even tell my kids in the future, you know, with something as big as that's definitely something great. When I joined and I became Chief Medical Officer for British Wrestling, I really enjoyed that experience of being with the Scottish and English guys up into the Commonwealth Games. That was a very special experience. So definitely I would say it's the relationships that I've, like, made, as well as making a difference for some of these, like, people. And they're not just anybody, they're the best in the world, you know. So and the fact that they come to me for that advice is humbling and an honor. So I definitely I enjoy it a lot.
Sorry, you go.
Do you watch much MMA? Do you watch
I do.
UFC?
Yeah.
What sort of? Who's your guy?
It's my guy.
He's definitely going to be a wrestler.
Well, this is
Don't
what
say
I was
Bo
wondering.
Nickal.
This is what I was wondering. Do you enjoy watching the wrestling into MMA aspect?
I do. Although I do think overall the level is a lot less. Like if on,
Really?
yeah, I really do. But I'd probably say Habib. I think he, even though a lot of people will say, oh, he's got great wrestling. I don't actually think he's got the best freestyle wrestling, but I think he perfected MMA wrestling. And really because you notice that he uses the cage quite a lot in terms of getting his takedowns and things like that. Whereas it's a circular mat for Olympic freestyle wrestling. So it would just be, you wouldn't be able to do that. But I like how he perfected MMA wrestling to a point where he got to the pinnacle, remained undefeated. And also what I like about that kind of style is that you don't really get much damage to yourself. You look at his face at the end of a fight compared to some of these guys that are just gunslingers, and they're okay, they may have won, but they're Kayla Roundtree, man, that did not look okay, and then how much of the life expectancy are you taking off there? So yeah, I like him. The best wrestler in my opinion who transitioned to MMA sadly never really wrestled much in his MMA fights, which was Yoel Romero. Yoel is see his credentials, and for wrestling, I know there's great guys even Henry Cejudo, Daniel, and stuff like that. But Yoel was a world champion, multiple world medalist, Olympic silver medalist, and he would just go into these MMA fights and just slug it out like a madman. And I used to be like, Yoel, you can wrestle so well. Why are you not doing it? Why? I don't know.
Again, a guy from mega poverty, came from Cuba,
the Cubans as well.
But do you know he never really wanted to wrestle? Did you know that? He wanted to get picked for the boxing team. At that time, the regime in Cuba, they told you what sport you were doing. So you went along, trained, they looked at you and went, you're going to wrestling. He's like, no, I'm not going to go to the boxing. No. You just gone to wrestling. So it's mental how he ended up there kind of by accident, eh?
Yeah, and how good he became.
Mate, I was a mega Yoel Romero fan. I loved him, eh? I wish, however old he is now, I don't know. But
he's probably 41, 42. I don't
he's
know.
not though. He definitely was lying about his age for sure, eh?
No comment.
I was a big Yoel fan as well, for sure.
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Opened our eyes up in the work you're doing with UK wrestling and the world wrestling level as well. Keep it up, man, and keep the next generation of wrestlers safe. Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, likewise. And as I say, wrestling and MMA, they're so connected so much. So if I can help in any way, both in the MMA world as well as the wrestling world, and for you guys as well personally, it'd be an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you.
Do you want maybe drop in where the guys can find you on social media?
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah. Sam, that's SAAM SF is my Instagram link, and I can maybe
we'll fire it in the bottom.
Fire at the bottom of my email as well if anyone wants to get in touch with me.
It'll all be tagged into everything.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.